Hello again. We're back to talk more about the art and science side of marketing, specifically when it comes to a campaign. Today we want to explore more on the benefits of including both art and science to ensure an all-around successful campaign. Welcome back, Jackie.
Thanks, Wendy.
Let's dive right into our topic. How would you describe a scientific or an analytics-oriented campaign?
That's a really good question. It actually, for me, would start before the campaign ever comes to be. First things first, we always want to try and get as deep an understanding as we can about our customers or the target audience that we're trying to reach and understand the things that are going to resonate most with them, whether that's messages, images, different ways to talk about things, tonality, or even how we reach them. All of that we need to know first before we can start to design any type of campaign.
And the artistic side of a campaign would be more focused on the visual detail of the promotional materials. There might also be focus group research completed in both aspects, though may or may not be included in the final outcome. So what would you say is the first step for integrating the two sides together?
So after we get a good understanding of who our targeted audience is, the actual customer base that we're trying to reach, the next step that we would want to do would be to sit down with the creative department and start to brainstorm some ideas about what the campaign might actually look like, from the visual elements that you mentioned before to the messaging or even the ways in which we want to deliver these messages. And then once we kind of get a feel, we'll get some direction on where we go from there. The creative team should then take that direction and kind of come back with a few different options that we'll be able to choose from to make sure that we're on brand, make sure that we're on message, and make sure that the ideas that they've come up with really are integrated with what we know is going to work with that target audience.
Yeah, so I'm reminded of a door hanger I saw recently at a resort. And in the door hanger, there was a variety of thematic wellness concepts and activity suggestions for each. So then I was thinking about that from the idea of developing a campaign. And it occurred to me like, okay, so in a lot of departments, perhaps they might have the creatives who are given direction from one piece of another department, but not necessarily connected with the marketing department to get that really well-rounded picture, so they get the analytics piece as well as the creative piece into that. And so as a result, I found myself wanting a little bit more information and like more details of what could I find out on my own, or did I only have to call the front desk? Was that the only option? So then I wanted to say, what is the, like, from your perspective, what would be the science side that could potentially add to that campaign?
So I think there's a couple things going on here that you're mentioning. So let me just recap and make sure that I understand what you're describing first, and then I'll kind of jump in and answer the question if that's okay with you. Okay, so it seems like you were on vacation, you saw this door hanger looking thing in your hotel room, and it gave you some ideas or things that you could do while on vacation to stay healthy and fit. Yes. Is that right? What were some of the examples of things that you could do?
So one was to rent a DVD on a some type of fitness. One was to go to the spa. One would be to like walk on the beach. So they had some ideas that you could do on your own
to stay healthy on vacation. Okay, and you found that falling kind of flat.
Well, I was like, well, this is a great idea. And then I looked at the suggestions and it was like, I don't have a DVD player.
In your room. You mean you don't travel with one regularly?
I know, right?
Huh.
And so then I was wondering, well, are there some group classes I could go to that I wanted it connected a little bit more to the things that the resort was actually offering, I guess, as opposed to just here's things I can do on my own.
Okay, so that's kind of where I thought you were going, but I just wanted to double check for myself and then for everyone that's here watching just to kind of make sure. Something that happens a lot, and my hypothesis, I'll use a scientific term there, about what may have happened in this case is that the creative team was not given enough information. They were probably told by someone somewhere in corporate or who had just come back from a vacation and said, hey, this is probably a cool idea, but didn't really take the time to understand how this might work or even more so, what is the end result? What are the actions that we would want our audience to take? So in this case, it kind of sounds like the creative team was designing something in a vacuum. They didn't have all the information. They didn't know how to make things stand out. I don't even know where they came up with the idea of a door hanger. That feels a little bit odd, even for the placement of the message.
Yeah, yeah.
And
there were some other signs around the facility as well. What I first saw was the door hanger, because you're going into your door.
That was like the attraction again.
Right.
And you didn't get that confused with the privacy sign that's always there?
It was different enough colors that it did stand out. Yeah.
So a couple things. So one, I think just the overall idea or execution of the concept probably needed more work and more refining and understanding before they even got to the creative phase. So kind of that designing in a vacuum thing that I talked about. The other thing that kind of comes to mind for me is, what did we want our audience to do as a result of this, or kind of what was the follow through going to be for the target audience? You mentioned you don't even have a DVD player. So how is that going to work? So thinking about from the more analytical or sciencey side of things, what is it that we want our customer to do? Is that even something that's viable or that makes sense in the moment that we're asking them to actually go ahead and do something? So if they would have had some more insight and understanding and kind of thought through, okay, this person is on vacation, this person probably doesn't have a DVD player, or what are some other ways that we could bring it to life based on the resources that are available, like the fitness classes that you mentioned. Something like that might make a little bit more sense. So in this case, it sounds like probably not such a great case of a great idea gone wrong, because there was not enough information in terms of what it should look like, where it should be placed, or even how the audience would follow through and take the desired action, because there just wasn't enough information and insight at the beginning of the project.
Yeah, so then I was thinking, well, how might I go about designing that campaign? They did, did the guests ask for it? Are they responding to guests of a certain demographic group or age group that maybe I wasn't in that group? I'm not sure. So then thinking about that, when we bring both the arts and the science together in a campaign and working with a campaign development team, what do you think is like the most critical piece to bring those two together?
I think everyone needs to be involved in the process from the beginning, if at all possible. From the kind of right after that moment of inspiration hits, when someone says, oh, I've got a really great idea, to, okay, what does that really translate to from a communication and creative perspective, all the way through to, okay, the action and the follow through of the audience, like I mentioned. And even afterward, when it's over, how are we tracking this, and how are we going to know that this is a good idea and something that actually makes sense in the long run? So kind of thinking about the project from start to finish, having all those people in the room. It's very hard if you're coming into a project in the middle of something and you didn't get all the upfront information, or you might not understand the objective. It's hard to be passionate about something that you're just kind of coming in halfway through. So in my opinion, one of the most critical steps is getting all of the right people in the room, which is a combination of the creative team, the branding team, the rest of the marketing teams, and even the analytic teams from the very beginning, to design a truly holistic and integrated campaign from start to finish.
Right. And also include some of the end users. What exactly do they
How could I forget about mentioning them? Of course. Yes.
Well, you said bring everybody into the team, right? So making sure that we also bring in those end users. Like, how do they see themselves benefiting from such a program?
And that's actually great questions that we would want to ask before we even get to the development stage of the campaign, is kind of doing some concept testing and determining whether or not this is a good idea to begin with, something that the customers would find value in, that they would participate in, that they would see themselves using when they're on vacation. And there's probably a whole segment of customers who aren't going to use it on vacation. And then there's probably a segment of customers who are. So trying to figure out who they are, what they look like, what's important to them, and how they would want to engage in these types of activities and have a little bit more of that healthy vacation. So bringing them in on the front end to kind of help concept the idea, but then kind of doing some customer check-ins at various points in the design process from a creative perspective. Is this catching their attention? Is it generating the awareness? Maybe doing some testing at the site and saying, okay, now that the creative is, quote unquote, in market, in this case, which is the hotel, again, is it doing what we need it to do? And more importantly, is the guest then getting the information that they need to take the action? Where do I go? What are the classes? What are the offerings? How do I go about this participation process?
Yeah.
And then at the end, trying to figure out, well, how many people are actually using this? Is this a worthy use of our dollars, or should we be reappropriating this money to some other type of program?
Yes. And then I was also thinking along those same lines as a potential user when I saw this door hanger. I do have a background in wellness and health and all of that. So that seemed to work, it was like useful information. But I'm wondering how many people show up that may not have any background, and so they wouldn't know what to choose.
Right.
And then would there be a person that could help guide them through that process of what to choose when, to make it really well-rounded and full. And so we see like we definitely need to add some analytical kind of components to help monitor that.
Yeah, I think that, like I mentioned at the beginning, I think insights were missing all over the place. And so that's what we talk about when we're talking about this more analytical component that could really help inform all the different parts of the campaign so that in the end, the customer gets what they want and the company gets what they need, which hopefully in the end is making the customer happy and having them, in this case, engage in those healthy behaviors while on vacation.
So now that's some really good concepts that you bring up.
Thanks.
So maybe let's look at a different example of how that might look in a campaign.
So just because we're on this like health and wellness path, that reminds me of Zumba cruises. Have you ever been on a Zumba cruise?
I have not.
I have not yet, but I intend to go one day.
I've been on cruises and I've been to Zumba, but not together.
Me too, and worked for a cruise company.
There you go.
But when I'm thinking about the Zumba cruise because I feel that they are brilliant with the way that they kind of package this entire experience from start to finish. So the pre-cruise communications and just getting people interested in taking a whole exercise vacation. So from the bringing up the awareness that these types of products are even out there, how to sign up, where to sign up, what cruise is the right cruise for you. That's a whole marketing campaign in and of itself.
Right.
Then they get on board the ship and the marketing on some of these programs is just phenomenal. I mean, I've seen examples on varieties of cruise ships where even the key card to your room is branded with Zumba on it. The daily schedule with all the activities has all of the exercises and all the things that feature Zumba listed so they know exactly where to go. They have signage in the elevator, even by the buffet. So hopefully there's some healthy options in the buffet. But they have signage in the elevator and in the big atriums all over the cruise ship. So the customer really is getting that soup to nuts experience. I've even seen when they come off the ship, just when we're thinking about tracking and we're thinking about analytics, where they'll send out a post-cruise survey asking about whether or not this cruise met their expectations. Would they come again? Would they recommend it? Is there anything that they would want Zumba to do differently in the future? So not only are we getting people to come on board this very integrated experience from the beginning, but they're trying to build up this loyal customer base to get them coming back again and again.
Right, right. And that really makes it like you feel like you're going on a Zumba cruise instead of just a cruise that has some Zumba with it.
Correct, which I think is what happened with your flyer.
Yes.
Or sorry, your door hanger.
Yes, yes. It was a concept that was sort of there but not fully integrated as well as it could have been.
Right.
Because it's a great concept and I'd love to see that developed even more. So let's look at the Zumba cruise idea some more. You know, like what kinds of analytics would be useful to add? to blend together with the visuals and the registration.
Sure. So I'm, again, kind of starting from the beginning of the process. We want to understand and find Zumba customers, people who are interested in Zumba. So working with the different Zumba partners so that we can figure out who these Zumba people are and how we can contact them. How can we even start advertising something like this exists? So that's kind of step one. It would be finding who those customers are. Once we know who they are, probably having some conversations with them would be my next recommendation in terms of some of the stuff that we were talking about before. Is a Zumba cruise appealing? What would you like on your Zumba cruise? How should we message and advertise that this is even something that's out there? So getting some of that insight and input very, very early on in the process in order to develop the promotional materials that are needed to get enough people to sign up for the cruise. Once we have people signed up for the cruise, then there's a bunch more opportunity for communication and promotional messaging between the time that they book and the time that they actually sail. So getting them to sign up for the different classes, getting them to sign up for different healthy shore excursions or different onboard experiences.
Very thematic.
Even meeting other cruisers. A lot of these themed cruises now will have all different types of opportunities for Google Hangouts or meetups and stuff like that, so that even if you're going alone, you're really not alone because there's other people like you who are on the ship. So trying to figure out how they can continue to integrate this experience throughout is all based on the information that we know about the customer. When they're on board the ship, there's a host of analytics that we can track. That little key card that I mentioned before, we track your every movement. So we know every time you swipe your key card what you're doing. So when you're at the gym, what you bought on board the ship, what classes you signed up for, the food that you're ordering in the main dining room, all of that is trackable. There's so much analytical information that creates this amazing database for us on how we can continue to learn about our Zumba customers and how we can continue to market to them while they're on board during that experience. But again, how to get them to come back again next time. And then, like I mentioned before, ending with those satisfaction surveys so that we can continue to learn how to improve. So we're tracking stuff beforehand, we're tracking stuff on board, and then we're tracking stuff when they get off the ship, continuing to refine this process so that next year's Zumba cruise is even better than the current cruise.
Right. And that's excellent. And that's what really I love about blending the art and the science together, is because now you don't have this just, a lot of people think, and we used to a long time ago, with just the creative side, it was like, well, we've made these pretty flyers, we have this beautiful event, done.
Right.
But then you look back and you say, well, how good did we really do? And how could we really truly add to that? Now, what helps, especially with a Zumba cruise, is that you have the Zumba entity, which already has this huge database of people, both enthusiasts and instructors who are connected with the corporate office. So now they can then pass the cruise details on to the instructors, who can then promote to their group to bring. So now you have even more than just a bunch of individuals showing up. You have groups of connected Zumba enthusiasts from this, that are connected to the same instructor. Now they're all coming to show up on that cruise. So they have all these little pockets of friends and family, which is a great way to really deepen that connection with your own personal Zumba instructor, and not just as well as the cruise itself.
It's a very immersive experience, even from before you get on board the ship. And then think about all the connections and friendships that you make when you're on board that you can continue to foster through social media once you get back home.
Yes, and then, if you're traveling, like, oh, you go to Zumba in this city. Well, I'm going to go to that city, and so, hey, I'll go to your Zumba class. So now you're fostering this community, a global community, as opposed. So you started to say that there was a lot of things you could track on the cruise ship once they're actually there on board. So what kinds of things? Go into a little bit more detail on that. What might you see?
How much time do you have? No, kidding. No, I mean
4 hours. No, I'm just kidding.
In all seriousness, no. Every time you give your cabin number as a guest or you swipe your room key card, there is a massive database that's on board the ship that's collecting the information. So whether it's how much money you spend in the spa, if you spend to go to those extra exercise classes that have an upcharge, or the specialty restaurants, what you buy on board the ship, if you gamble in the casino, play bingo, buy art, not just dollars, but actually what it is you're purchasing and what it is that you're consuming. If you are in a situation where you order the same drink 3 days in a row, and for this example, we'll make it a healthy smoothie and not a cocktail, but by day 4, we have already seen a pattern in your behavior and in your consumption and what it is that you want. So we can start to tailor some of the messaging while you're on board the ship and say, hey, are you going to want your smoothie at 3 o'clock again today? Right? So there's things that we can do on board like that, but then behind the scenes, so usually those databases get updated about every 24 hours. They'll uplink. The corporate office is then back home and they're analyzing this continuously growing large database in terms of trying to figure out and segment our customers moving forward. So is it something where Zumba cruisers are going to do more healthy activities on board the ship than our typical cruiser? We'll be able to make those types of comparisons.
Or what times of day
Right.
they prefer to do their classes.
Right. Or do they engage in other types of onboard and ashore activities that the typical cruiser may or may not engage in because they're there for different purposes? So the more information that we're collecting, because we can track all of this behavior, then behind the scenes, we're continuing to learn and grow and get a much deeper understanding of who this customer is, which will only help us develop more visually appealing and effective, creative, and messaging the next time around.
Right, because we would look at, like in our creative side or the artistic side, we would think, well, okay, where do we want to place each different type of picture or in this case, a Zumba logo? Where do we put that? Do we put that just in the exercise? Do we put it in every door frame, or like you said, with the key cards? Where is the best placement for each of those types of promotional details?
Right.
And then, so using the analytics piece, is we can find maybe even what makes the most sense for placement of those promotional pieces.
Right. I mean, there's all kinds of testing that we can do. Maybe if we place the sign for the exercise classes on the main deck where registration is, where it has a lot more foot traffic, versus sticking it up by the spa, which might have less foot traffic. So we can start to compare and contrast the placement of all of these different onboard promotional materials and see if we're driving more traffic, if we're driving more of the desired behavior, which is to get them to participate in the Zumba-themed activities in this case.
Yes, and not just have random things, but it's like, it feels like you've actually stepped into Zumba world, or Zumba land.
Zumba at sea.
Zumba at sea.
But one thing that we always think about, whether it's something that's as crazy immersive as the Zumba cruise, or even if it's a single piece or part of a smaller campaign like your door hanger to begin with, is the objective. What's the point of this creative piece? Is it to generate awareness? Is it to evoke an emotion or get people thinking and feeling about a particular thing? Or is it to actually get them to take an action? Rent the DVD player, go to the website, sign up for the Zumba cruise, take a class at home, right? We have to think about what it is that specific piece is designed to do so that we can track the effectiveness of that piece throughout the process.
Yes. That sounds like such a fun week.
Right. Let's go cruising.
Let's go. And so hopefully that accomplished the same thing for the guests that did go. And then they want to come back and they go again next year or the year after. And they want to bring more of their own little Zumba families, if you will, to come. So then from that perspective, after the cruise, what kinds of pieces would we want to make sure are in place besides promotional materials to help make sure that they come back again?
I mean, there's all kinds of things that we can do. So we can just thank them for coming, right? Hope you had a really good time. We can encourage them to share all of their experiences, on social media, so that we're continuing to build the buzz. We can, again, ask them for their feedback, like we had mentioned a couple of times, in terms of how to continue to make it better. So we want to ride that high, so to speak, for as long as we can. We don't want them to get home on Sunday and then on Monday there's a promotional piece for the next cruise, Zumba or otherwise. That's a little bit too much. They're still riding high on the vacation that they had. And the experience that they went through in this case. And we want to draw that out as long as we can, because we want to keep those positive opinions and feelings, you know, kind of going, as opposed to saying like, oh, one and done, vacation over, moving on to the next thing. And like, what else can I get out of you? So we would always want to start with some communications, you know, welcome back, you know, please share, please give us more feedback. Then normally there's a little bit of a quiet period where there's really just no communication. And then depending on the industry or what the objective is, kind of bringing them back into the loop for now what's going to start the next promotional cycle for the next activity that we want them to be a part of.
Yes. And that's really, I'm glad you brought up those points, because we often think of well, okay, what's next? Whereas instead, it's like, wow, didn't you have the best time ever? Wasn't that great?
Right.
Those types of things that we can really capitalize on. A key piece of information for future is looking at, well, how was it for you, really? And not just the typical customer satisfaction surveys, but like, what was good? How was it good? How, you know, how are you feeling? It like, are you, you know, look at all the shares that are out there. Look at all the ways that the people have brought back the experience that they had. And so then that reminds me, like, the evaluation piece of campaigns is the part that we often forget or not not pay enough of attention to.
Yes, I agree.
In general, I think, you know, in a lot of marketing departments, that or even just company departments that maybe have small areas of marketing, we forget to look at how was the campaign really.
Right. I think, I don't know, it's just most marketing departments are under-resourced, understaffed, have very small budgets, or not the type of budgets that they should have. So because they're resource depleted, they're probably not able to do as much follow through as they would want to, because they got to move on to the next thing, right? We got to move on to the next campaign, the next promotion, the next event. So it's really hard to kind of take stock of the existing thing once it's over. So I think that's kind of why some of that is happening. But there's a lot of metrics that we can put in place, even for resource depleted type of marketing departments. Just things, again, if we're asking someone to share, let's track the shares. We can count the likes. We can count the shares, the retweets, that type of thing. Very, very simple things we can do. If they're uploading pictures, we can ask them to upload to a specific page, and we can look at things like that. If we have satisfaction surveys in place, then that mechanism is already there. It's just a matter of asking the marketing department or the analytics department to pull the information for that particular sailing and taking a look at it. But there's metrics that we want to be looking at along the way. If we just pick on Zumba Cruise for just a little bit longer, we should be looking at metrics as we go. So looking at things like how many people are going to the sign up and registration webpage, and how early on and how often, how many signups are we getting? Are we on pace to sell out before the ship sails? So those are metrics and things that we're looking at. Also things that we would be looking at before the ship ever leaves the dock would be how many activities did they sign up for in advance? You know, how engaged are they with this experience before they ever even leave the port? Because if someone is under engaged, they're not doing the online check-in, they're not signing up for their dining options or signing up for exercise class, try and draw them in to help them make the most of the experience. When they're on board the ship, we're looking at all the activities that they're participating in, trying to see is everyone getting the most out of the experience, so that by the time we get home, we get a much more holistic picture of the entire thing from start to finish, with those satisfaction metrics, or gonna cruise on the Zumba Cruise again. That's the last piece of the puzzle, right? But we should be able to see and look for connections. Are people who are more likely to cruise again, or likely to recommend, or likely to share, are they the ones that booked earlier on or signed up for stuff early on or participated in more activities than the average guest. If we can start to find some of those patterns and kind of see what differentiates them from other cruisers on that particular sailing, then we have even more information to target other people like that who are the best fit for this particular product and this particular campaign as we move forward.
Exactly. Everything she said. So it really is important. And like you were seeing, some of the metrics you're checking on are
Regularly.
like beforehand, during the cruise, and post-cruise also gives you excellent feedback for planning the next cruise.
Correct.
You know, and like where, and even as down to where to put the beautiful pieces of artwork around. Do you have it, you know, all over the ship, everywhere, so they get just numb from looking at it? Do you have it in key places where maybe they do tend to congregate?
Right.
You know, so there's like, there is an art and a science to both.
Correct. As with many things that you and I have talked about.
Yes. And so the big picture is when you're planning and executing a campaign, it's not just the art or not just the science. It's really about bringing the best of both together to produce the ultimate experience for the customer, because that's what this is really all about.
That's right.
It's been a pleasure.
Always is.